If you haven't done so already, we hope you'll take a moment and visit our website called justbarelychristian.com.
At justbarelychristian.com, you'll find links to all the episodes of The Soul's Garage, all of those things that are so much in demand right now, as well as, some really cool jokes. You'll find great contact information, some great graphics, and a lot of other nonsense, stuff that he created.
Check us out at justbarelychristian.com and let us hear from you. If enough of you contact us, maybe we could divide into small groups and get to know each other better. But I digress. Let's open the garage door.
It's a place to work, a place to talk, maybe tell a story or two. It's a place to tinker with belief and ask what's good and true. There are things to keep and things to toss or see them differently. You'll find us in the Soul's Garage. Come share a laugh for three. The Soul's Garage, the Soul's Garage. Whatever your model of faith, let's question, ponder, wonder why on any path you take.
Welcome to the Soul's Garage. I'm David Ezekiel.
And I'm Paris Donahue. And we've opened the garage door to hang out with you and tinker with this vehicle called faith in order to keep it running smoothly in all of our lives.
Vehicle?
Vehicle.
Okay.
That's the way the Almighty intended that.
All right. Very good.
The late theologian and author and pastor Carlisle Marney, who's had a big influence on the two of us, claimed that certain descriptors, when applied to people, should be treated as adjectives that describe a person's situation rather than nouns that define their entire identity.
Now, he taught that Jesus understood this distinction very well. For example, adjectives describe a state or condition, such as leper, Samaritan, sinner, etc., etc., etc.
But nouns define true identity, such as human being, person, or child of God. In other words, the core identity, the noun, is the person's humanity and divine connection, while other labels, that is, the adjectives, merely add texture and depth and light to that core identity.
And we think that Marney's distinctions are more needed now than probably at any other time in memory. We lived through the era of the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War protests, and we saw the suffering, anger, and lives that were ruined because most of us chose to categorize one another with adjectives instead of nouns. And you know, it seems to be reoccurring once again.
Seems like it's worse than it's ever been.
I guess it does.
Yeah. All we seem to be able to do these days is to pigeonhole each other with words like Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, gay, straight, urban, suburban, rural, socialist, fascist, woke, anti-woke. Take your pick.
And perhaps what breaks our hearts the most is how easily people of faith and whole communities of faith have embraced this mindset. And when a divine mandate for this man's mindset is assumed, it produces the unholiest concoction, the unholiest brew of all.
You see, when people are reduced to mere adjectives, it becomes easy to dismiss them, shun them, shame them, attack them, ruin them, even take their lives.
So for the next few episodes in the garage, we want to talk about the problems that arise when we get the nouns and the adjectives wrong, and what can happen when we actually get them right.
To guide our discussions in the garage, we have with us today Emily Hensley. Emily is the owner of Small Fry Marketing, and she has been immensely helpful to these two old geezers who've tried to make our podcast better, and she's been very helpful in that regard.
Everything we are today, we owe to her.
It's getting deep around here, but that's all right.
The check for that 3 or 4 cents is in the mail.
Emily's not a professional theologian, neither are we as far as that goes, but she is a person of faith. She's not a historian or an expert on social movements, but she brings to the garage a wealth of life experiences, positive and negative, that directly relate to the problems of nouns and adjectives in our society. Emily, you're our very first guest in the Soul's Garage, so welcome to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're delighted that you've chosen to hang out with two old geezers like us.
My favorite two old geezers.
See, that's why she's so good at what she does.
She didn't say how many other old geezers she knows.
She's very judicious in that regard. So, Emily, we're just going to turn it over to you for a little while and just ask you to tell us your story. We're going to be, going to have another couple of episodes where we delve deeper into some of these issues, but we just want to hear your story today.
Sure. So I have all sorts of adjectives that have been attached to me over the years. I did grow up in a wonderful home, wonderful mother and father. I'm the oldest of three girls. Always been fiercely protective of my family. There were a lot of things going on the sidelines, though. For instance, the church that we were involved in. I can't say church is bad. It's not bad. But we were a part of the Southern Baptist community, and there was a very strict set of rules that were sometimes spoken and sometimes unspoken. And I could remember one time going to my granddaddy's church, and the pastor was screaming and sweating and just, arms in the air and going back and forth across the stage. And, you're just watching like this man's going to have a heart attack any minute now. Somebody call the ambulance. And, I've learned through life that when people scream, they're screaming because they want to be heard. We do this in arguments with our spouses. You get into a heated discussion and somebody's getting louder and louder and louder, and that's because they want to be heard. And when you have this evangelical Christian movement, they so badly want you to adopt that set of rigid rules that they yell them in your face. They wrap them in falsehoods because they want to control that religion, and it becomes more about religion and less about God. And so
I was just going to say, it sounds a little bit like what preachers do in sermons. You got 3 points. Point one's is good. Point three is good. Second point's kind of weak, so you put in the margins, yell louder.
Yeah, pound pulpit harder.
Pound pulpit harder.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I know, but I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, you're. I love
See
it.
what I have to put up with every time.
Every time. But that being said, I did have a foundation of faith through that. I adopted my relationship with God that has evolved tremendously over my 51 years. And there was also some things going on the sidelines that were affecting me as a young girl. Starting around the age of 6, I was being sexually abused by 2 men, a father and a son, close to our family. And that went on for a while. And I learned that I was supposed to please men. I was pretty. I was going to make a good wife. And those things were so toxic that they settled into my soul. And sometimes I lost my faith because it felt unfair Why was God allowing this to happen to me? It affected the relationship I had with my dad. Good man, hardworking, but I think in my mind, I blamed him for not knowing and intervening, but there was no way to know. These predators are very careful, and you're going to get in trouble if you tell, kind of thing. But I also had this very quiet secret from a very young age that I liked girls. I was drawn to girls, but you didn't do that. That was not acceptable in the Southern Baptist community. So I shoved it down and shoved it down and shoved it down and threw myself at boys like it was my job. I just thought, one of these days, I'll get it right. I'll find the man that will satisfy me in my soul and take away these feelings that I have toward women. So I did that multiple times. I married more than my fair share of men. And so my adjectives up to this point were child abuse survivor, um, promiscuous girl. So as time went on, I just got angrier and angrier and angrier at everything. This brewing in my soul poisoned me from the inside out. I had a lot of unresolved mental health stuff from what I went through. Um, so then I threw myself into my career, my previous career. I was the national sales and marketing manager for a business unit in a $5 billion company. And I was a high performing leader, very successful business unit, working myself to death. I remember one day my mother, who was a Southern Baptist employee of the church, she looked at me one day and she said, pardon my French, "You look like shit." She said, "You're tired. Your hair is, just, it's not shining anymore. Your face is not shining anymore." But I was so good at my job, it satisfied something in me where I was good enough because I never felt good enough. And so that satisfied me, even though it was killing me. So I continued this cycle through divorce and throwing myself into my job, making a very significant income. And there were other tumultuous things going on in my life. My husband was cheating on me. My daughter and her family were living with us temporarily when they moved here to Tennessee. And I had a colleague that was moved into a new position at work, and I took his position, and he didn't like it. And he just hammered me all day long, tried to ruin my reputation, tried to, just completely dissolve my career. So I've got that going on. And then I had another male colleague who tried to hit on me and said some really inappropriate things. So that took me right back to where I was before, all that anguish. And ultimately, I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore. And I drove to a park and I parked near a lake and I had a gun in my hand in 2018. And I had every intention of stopping the anguish, every intention. And as I had that gun resting on my chest and leaning back in the seat of my car, and I looked out to the darkness, and I just saw my children and my grandson, and they saved my life that night. I ended up checking myself into a facility to overcome this crisis, and I was there for about 3 days. And I was given the tools to work through some of that stuff. About 8 months later, the company had a massive layoff, and me and about 104 of my colleagues were unemployed. And this was a company that I'd poured 20 years of my life into. Where am I going to go now? What am I going to do? But it was a God thing, because when I was laid off, I was driving home and I had this overwhelming peace. Like, okay, I'm free from that, but still felt like a failure, because I felt like I was a failure after failure after failure. I was a failure because these men were doing bad things to me. I was a failure because, I didn't adopt the Southern Baptist mindset. I was a failure because I was secretly attracted to women. I was a failure because I was a divorcee. I was a failure because I attempted suicide. I was a failure because I was a domestic abuse survivor in one of my marriages. And so I I labeled myself as failure. And you know, at the end of the day, I could see where God was intervening in so many of those areas. So I realized that it was okay to be me and live authentically. And then in 2019, I started dating my wife. And she was raised in a Southern Baptist home, and her daddy was the pastor. Imagine her turmoil. So when I finally gave into who I was authentically, it was like a lot of things clicked into place. And what's funny is I'm closer to the God that I know more now than I ever have been, because I'm free. I've released those things. I'm not all of those things. I'm not a failure. I'm not a professional divorcee. I'm not all of these things. What I am is a woman, a human, and a child of God.
Excellent.
Yeah. It occurs to me as I was listening to you, you talk about, you categorize yourself as a failure. And it occurs to me that that's a part of the whole nouns and adjective thing that we had not really thought about. It's not just the adjectives that we use to describe the other person, but it's also the adjectives we use to describe ourselves, and how debilitating that can be as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you've been, I'll just say it like this, you've been very brave, courageous, to be able to share that with us, and also with the others that are hanging out in the garage with us, sharing your vulnerabilities. And normally we usually keep things a little more lighthearted in the garage, but sometimes it was always my experience in the garage that sometimes we really dealt with those heavy, serious topics. And I think this is one of them, because I think Paris, that the days are really a lot darker right now.
Oh, yeah.
Than they have been in years.
Absolutely.
And also one of the things that we're coming to discover in encouraging people to be brave to share their stories and to become authentic selves, where we're moving into health and wholeness. We're discovering that there are a lot of backstories like this, and that's something I think that we need to encourage even more so.
Absolutely.
The development of that. Yeah.
And I learned through therapy, or I came to realize through therapy, that I'm not thankful for what happened to me, but I'm grateful that I could be able to help someone else. Someone who, I use that as a tool. And I've talked to many, many women about this. And if I can just help one person see that, you can be a high performing leader and still think you're a failure, but you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of across the board, and not only life, but in so many professions. So many of the people that we hold up as great success stories secretly saw themselves as failures, or, it's not quite enough. I got to get this one bit more, and it's such a dead end street. It really is. Yeah.
I know one individual in one of the churches that I've been in that made the statement to me. He said, "I just don't feel like I am enough." Now, by all outward appearances, he had a great job, great family, great income. All of the external trappings were there. And you would think, wow, this, what a success story. But internally, he felt, that he wasn't whole, that he wasn't there. And so that takes, that to some extent, that takes real introspection and a willingness to go there. Of which, you've shared your story and you've been willing to go there. It's only been in my lifetime that I guess I've covered a lot of years. I'm one
You
of the
cover a
old
lot.
geezers.
You cover a lot of territory.
I've covered a lot of territory, but I remember when I was younger that you went to a therapist and it was like, oh no, there's something wrong. With
You don't talk about that. Yeah, you don't
no.
talk about that.
Yeah. In our day, we just dealt with our problems. I got that over and over and over again.
Oh yeah. Well, oh yeah. Well, it still existed in my generation,
Well, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we talk about being, not enough. One of the things that my grandmother taught me that, or told me, and she recently passed away, she would say, "You are enough." Every time I felt like a failure, and I would talk to her and she would say, "But you are enough."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's such wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really would like, you talked about being, as a result of all of this, you talked about being closer to God, and I kind of want to save that part of it for another one of these episodes. Yeah. But I just find that a fascinating journey that you started out in one place and ended up in another. But in some ways, if I'm hearing you right, it was like you came full circle, but you recognized for the first time. It's like it was the same, but it's not the same. If I'm hearing that correctly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we need to belabor anything at this point, unless you have another question or a comment.
I'm just
being a preacher, we always have to have something to say on every occasion.
Well, this is one of those occasions where Sometimes it's better to seem to be wise and be silent than to open your mouth
Speak and
and
remove all doubt. Right. Yeah. I will say one other thing. You talked about, that you weren't grateful for what you went through, and that resonated with me in that I've been through a lot of stuff in my life too, and I look back on it, and I'm not grateful for it, but I can say to God, I'm grateful that I came through that, what I learned out of that.
Absolutely.
I had a lady in my church one time say to me, how did you get to be so self-confident and put together? And nobody had ever said that to me. I never thought of myself in that regard. And all I could think to say to her was, well, I've been kicked around a lot by life, and hopefully I've learned a thing or two out of that. And I think that's where we all ultimately wind up.
Yeah, I've made jokes about, I've been around the block at least once, drug around it at least 2 or 3 times.
Drug behind a bus is more like it.
But there is one long story, and I don't want to go into this now. Maybe another day, but it's part of, to some extent, my backstory as well, about being drug around the block at least 2 or 3 times. One of my I believe that there are those parts of Scripture, those parts of the Bible, that become your own, that all of a sudden have your name written on them. And one of those is one of the stories about Jesus, who was in the boat with the disciples as they were going across the sea. And all of a sudden, the storm came up, and even though he was in the boat, he was with the disciples in the midst of the storm. And then it says, and they arrived on the other side. And I think that's part of the journey. Like I said, it's a story I'll tell another day, but it's one of those parts of the journey that you don't like. It scares the bejesus out of you. Sometimes you get battered and bruised in the aspect, but you arrive and on the other side, and that even in the midst of that, Jesus never took you out, didn't take the disciples out either of the midst of the storm.
And that reminds me of my favorite Bible verse, which is Philippians 1:6. Being confident in this very thing, that he who lives within you is faithful to complete it.
Exactly. I like this girl.
Yeah. To revert back to my Southern Baptist upbringing. Amen, sister.
Preach it, preach it.
Testify.
I testify. Can I get an amen?
No.
You don't get that in the United Church of Christ. The most I ever got was somebody at the door said, I really wanted to say amen to what you said. Well, why didn't you? That wouldn't have scared me.
Well, in the Presbyterian Church, we don't get that either.
Right, yeah, I bet.
It's like, ooh, I thought about saying that, but the notion went away.
Everything decently in order.
We had to make sure it was decently in an order.
Well, obviously, there's an awful lot more that can be explored with this, and we're going to do that. So we've invited Emily back to the garage for a few more sessions. We want to delve into the societal issues that we raised today because they are myriad. And then we also, as I indicated, we want to delve into some of the spiritual issues that we've introduced as well, and try to find some words of hope for the days ahead.
Yeah.
Which is my middle name, Hope.
That's true. That's true.
wow.
I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten
How cool.
that. Yeah. Right.
But As always, for you, our dear listeners, all 4 or 5 of you out there, as always, we would be glad for you to send us your thoughts, your ideas, even your stories, because we know that some of you have stories as well. So do we. And we'd be glad to try to address them in a later episode. So contact us at thesoulsgarage@gmail.com or through our website, justbarelychristian.com.
Well, Mama's calling us to the house for dinner, and of course, Emily, you're invited.
Yeah.
So I guess it's time to close the garage door and head inside. So until next time, I'm Paris Donahue.
And I'm David Ezekiel.
And we'll see you again here soon at Soul's Garage.
The Soul's Garage was written and recorded by David Ezekiel and Paris Donahue.
Our theme song was written by Adam and Brady Beard and Paris Donahue.
And performed and recorded by none other, Adam and Brady Beard, but not Paris Donahue.
They do great work. Our podcast cover art was designed by Nancy Arndt.
And our Just Barely Christian website was designed and is maintained by Small Fry Marketing. We promote them heavily.
Yes, we do. Our director of sartorial style from our office in Athens, Greece, is Euripides Pants.
I noticed you said Athens, Greece. You didn't say Athens, Georgia.
No, I've never known anybody from Athens, Georgia named Euripides.
All right. We'd love for you folks out there to send us your comments on Facebook or Instagram, or even email us at thesoulsgarage@gmail.com. And you can also contact us via our website at justbarelychristian.com.
And we'd really appreciate it if you would click that follow button on whatever platform you're using to listen to us or watch us. If you're not familiar with podcast terminology, that means you're following us. It does not mean we're following you. The judge made sure that we were clear on the distinction in that restraining order we got.
Gosh. As always, the Soul's Garage is a production of Two Old Geezers Studios, and apparently you can tell we're two old geezers. Folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Blessings to you today. Bye.
Bye.